All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar focusing on the geopolitics of the Caucasus with an emphasis on the foreign policies of small states coping with Russia's reemergence as an order-forming power. I am Lindsay Cliff. I'm currently a researcher here at American Foreign Policy Council's Central Asia and the Caucasus Institute, as well as a master's a master's student at Georgetown University within the Center for Eurasian, Russian, and East European Studies. Today, we will have the great opportunity to interact directly with Dr. Eduard Abrahamyan, author of the new book, Russia, Small States and the West, Polarity, Constellations and Heterogeneity in Geopolitics of the Caucasus. Dr. Abrahamyan is currently a senior research fellow at the Yerevan-based Institute for Security Analysis and a teaching fellow in international relations at University College London. He previously served as an aide to the President of the Republic of Armenia on foreign affairs between 2019 and 2021. We are also excited to welcome Professor Tengiz Pahladze, who will be leading our conversation with Dr. Abrahamyan to help us explore the themes of his book in greater depth. Professor Pahladze is a professor at the Georgian Institute of Public Affairs and a senior fellow at the European Center for International Political Economy. Previously, he was an advisor and foreign relations secretary to the President of Georgia. Before we begin, I would just like to remind our audience that this webinar is being recorded and will, of course, be posted on our YouTube, website, and Substack, so you'll be able to access it at any time. The audience should also feel free to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A function. And I would just ask that if you would please make sure to say your name and any institutional affiliation, we would greatly appreciate that. If you enjoy this event and would like to learn more, please subscribe to our Central Asia-Caucasus Institute Substack and also visit our website for more interesting publications as well as webinars. And so with that, without further ado, I'll hand it over to our discussants.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our webinar. It's a real pleasure to lead this discussion, and it's a real pleasure to meet even online my good friend and previous colleague in our previous life, Eduard Abrahamyan. Eduard, welcome. We have quite interesting discussion about very, very interesting book. And Eduard, first of all, let me thank you for this great books called Small States, Russia and the West. I had privilege to read it, and I would say this is so impressive, so powerful. And what is the most important is that it's written from inside the story. So we have a number of very good publication about Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, South Caucasus region, but mainly those good books are mainly observation from outside. But this is not just academic research. This is feeling. This is insider story. And that's very important, Eduard, because you are writing from Armenia, from the South Caucasus, the region where I would say geopolitics is not just a theory. This is the weather. This is the daily climate our countries live in. So, and let me start there. Did this book come from purely, let's say, academic curiosity, or from a more personal sense that the way small states like Armenia are understood in global theory is incomplete? Eduard.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Lindsay and Tengiz, for this opportunity. I'm so glad to meet you online, guys. And thank you very much to the audience. I would like to extend my gratitude to them as well, since they found time and interest to join us. This is very much appreciated. Tengiz, Important questions indeed. The curiosity was multifold, I would say. Came from both as an insider, an interest and an aspiration to understand in depth the real processes, the intricacy and the real geopolitical tendencies and dynamics taking place, and also academic curiosity, because if we look at the IR literature on small states, classic literature says that small states situated in the same region, neighboring small states, being located inside of the orbit of whether it is a great power sphere of influence or the great power seeks to shape its own order or agenda in there. The small states normally, and as IR literature suggests, behave similarly or at least compatibly. In their strategic positioning, strategic choices are quite compatible. Whereas in the case of the Caucasus, we see radically different sets of behavior. The all three states exerted or exhibited throughout their history of independence. So that was the core motivation and driving force for myself. And also, it is also important to emphasize that strategic heterogeneity, which I have conceptualized in my book, is a pattern, is distinctive puzzle of the South Caucasus geopolitics. This is something that outsiders, outside ponderers, objectively can skip or objectively can shed from their sides. But it is important factor shaping, forming the foreign policy choices, the distinctive or contrasting perceptions of the three small states in the Caucasus, and their alignments and their positioning or repositioning in the region amidst the different geopolitical processes, amidst the interplay of regional powers presented in the Caucasus.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. It's really interesting. So I try on the one way to ask you about your main arguments. On the other way, I try to prevent myself to be spoiler and make our audience still keep this intrigue and encourage them to read this book. But I have to ask you, you describe the region, you describe Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and you make quite interesting argument that they are not, let's say, footnotes of great regional picture. They are order makers. So what exactly do you mean when you describe the small countries as an order maker, considering their limited capacity?
Well, in my book, I argue that compared to the IR literature, which normally, put the suggestion or assumption that the small states, given their limitations in terms of material capabilities or their lack of power or system structural constraints, they are just rule takers. Whereas in the Caucasus and in my book, and this is actually one of my arguments, that the Caucasus states, I mean, let me start from the first argument, because they are all interconnected. There are basically three. And the first one is, unlike regions where small states typically align with consistent foreign policy trajectories, the Caucasus, during the period of tentatively 2 decades, stands as a contested arena between not only two divergent poles, namely Russia and the West, institutionally, but between two orders, competing orders, unfolding in the Caucasus, which the one of that is Russia's backed non-Western Eurasian order, which is in the process of being shaped with the consistent contribution of Iran, to a great extent Turkey, Azerbaijan, and so on, and also Armenia to a great extent, and the US-led Euro-Atlantic liberal order, which after the post-Cold War era, at the period of unipolarity, as we well know, the Euro-Atlantic integration was the global trend. And so the first argument of my book is that the region, the Caucasus, is a sphere, is the arena of order contestation, where the Eurasian non-Western order represents a set of rules, a set of values, a set of civilizational model of development, which contradicts to what the US-led Euro-Atlantic order suggests or profess. The second argument of my book is that the profound strategic non-like-mindedness that formed the geopolitical congruence is one of the hallmarks of the Caucasus geopolitics. It is reflected in the Caucasus states' divergent perceptions of the shared environment, which are rooted in the domestic political cultures and regimes, historical narratives, geocultural identity and values, as well as understanding their personal understandings of geopolitical location. This is something that I would like to cover in the future. So in other words, the indigenous patterns of statecraft and the indigenous traditions of understanding the environment, which the three small states share, obviously, they see them different. They see their environment and themselves quite differently. And in my research, as I used some theoretical and developed a theory in this book, I also developed the concept which is called geopolitical location, which means the location the states themselves decide are being situated in. So, for example, in case of Georgia, traditional Georgia perceived itself as part of the Euro-Atlantic or European geopolitics, whereas the steps of Armenia and over the period or subsequently of Azerbaijan made them to see themselves as in an opposite camp of the geopolitical location. And finally, the third argument of my book is that despite the traditional IR assumption that the small states are rule takers, I show here that the decisions small states took, Armenia and Azerbaijan and Georgia took, they per se contributed to the formation this or that regional order and the rules of the environment, or the say like the code of conduct of the states. And here I would like to emphasize that Russia here is in this book, Russia is an important variable in a sense that taking the concept of strategic shock, I examine the behavior of the states through their responses and reactions to the three strategic shocks. First was Russia's invasion in 2008, Crimea occupation, and the full-scale invasion to Ukraine in 2022, which shaped, in fact, the rules of the game in the Caucasus. Yeah, and I would like to share some slides just to give
Please.
you a deeper
Yes.
sense about some aspects of the book. Let me just try, if I may, to just, yeah. I just sent the request, but anyways. So
before you share, I would say that
yeah.
the description you gave to the region is extremely important, because you describe exactly what this heterogeneity of this region and diversity between the countries. And I think this is very important to understand when we're talking about these regions, this region, that though both three countries share long common history and ties and borders and so on, but they are completely different.
Yes,
And
because
this region is different.
absolutely, it stands in contrast to others, and it is normal. But the
Sure.
interesting thing is that the complexity and the intricacy of the region, in a sense of geopolitical processes, and how interagency works, and how the agency of the small states as such impact the formation or the formulation of non-Western order in the Caucasus is also one of the main features of the book.
So that's kind of rational, relational polarity, I would say.
Absolutely. I hope I can share it now.
Please.
Some slides that can be of use for the audience. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes.
So this slide is about the main arguments and the structure of the book in terms of its narrative and how it is narrated. The important point here is that I took the interpretation of the strategic shocks. All three states experienced equally, but responded differently, and trying to answer and address why they have responded differently, given that they are in the same region, neighboring with the same more or less actors, and they're considering also the fact that they are so different in terms of historical narratives, in terms of regimes, in terms of their understanding of the national interests and strategic positioning and location. All of these components, and also the constellations which I developed, in my book, also delivers reasonable power of analysis, because the state's behavior is shaped given that how they position themselves amidst the great powers, amidst the powers who are stronger than them, obviously, and so how they navigate the different geopolitical agendas, aspects, or shocks I have mentioned here. In terms of identity, I also used, I embedded effectively the concept of civilization just to enhance the picture, the mosaic, the complex picture of the analysis, to showcase how the states position themselves in terms of civilizational or cultural or geocultural aspects. Obviously, Georgia positioned itself as part of the European or Western culture or civilization. Armenia considered itself as part of the European civilization, but it positioned itself geopolitically and geoeconomically into the non-Western architecture. And so the same is Azerbaijan, which was obviously developed a strong, independent foreign policy, and trying to, in a sense, dictate its own terms on how the main poles should approach to them, should pursue their foreign policies or strategies towards this country. Few words about the theory. the constellation theory as an important toolbox of analysis for the small states, especially at the era of multipolar power politics, is important in a sense that compared to the traditional theories, the constellation theory looks the polarity or its manifestation in the regional level not as a systemic factor, as a systemic construct. In other words, it doesn't look the polarity in a top-down logic, but it considers how the polarity is seen from the positions of these small states. And that's the key of the research. That's the key why they, facing the same challenges, behave differently. The rest I will leave for readers to dig deeper into this. And there is also some examples of table analysis. The book came to the conclusion with this kind of picture, how the states in general position themselves between the competing orders. And you can see here the eventual drifts of the states, which was conditioned by their institutional alignment, regime compatibility with the major powers, their geocultural and even geocivilizational or civilizational affinity, which in fact shaped their position in the geopolitics of the region. And with this, and another important point that I would like to cover is that I have also developed the concept of present of the past, which is key, one of the important variables to explain the foreign policy choices, the paradigm of the elites making their decisions, informed decisions based on the historical experience they had. Obviously, all three states have dissimilar historical experience compared to other. For example, if you take Baltics, we see more or less compatible historical experience and interpretation of their past geopolitics. Whereas in the case of the Caucasus, we see a different picture. And with this, I would like to give you floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Edward. This is really very interesting and important, and I really like that you not just refer to constellation theory, but I would say you, in this book, at least how you described and how you use this theory, you turn it into a living system of relationship, because constellation where every small state has its own orbit, its own sense of gravity, let's say. And definitely why I said that geopolitics in the Caucasus is not a theory, it's a daily climate, because it sits between the big regional players. And everything you described, all the geopolitical challenges, and very well mentioned, the three countries, same geography, but at the same time, same shocks, same challenges. But and then we're coming to the existential question. Together, how you say answer these countries are facing daily? How can a small state stay sovereign when the ground keeps shifting?
Well, our nations are profoundly heterogeneous. I mean, they are profoundly different in almost all aspects. And the problem is that there is no common imagination of the region. In other words, the elites traditionally never think of approaching to the regional affairs, to the regional geopolitics jointly, or having at least a common sense of the region. Every single state, every elite subsequently, I mean, every elite in whether it is in Georgia, Armenia, or Azerbaijan, they pursue their interests, the state interests, based on their own national conditions, national priorities, and that's the main point. It is not, we shouldn't approach to it as a shortfall or something that we couldn't achieve compared to other regional states, for example, Baltics or Nordic states or even Gulf. The problem is that I mean, our nations in the Caucasus are very different, are profoundly different. There is one of the important conclusions Huntington came up with decades ago. He said that there are different regions where the civilizational gaps are shaping. So the Caucasus is the place where there is a huge gap in a civilizational terms. We are not monolithic in terms of culture, in terms of religion, in terms of language, in terms of perceptions. So in other words, there is no dynamics or at least trajectory to think of in a sense or in terms of a common interests and in terms of common perceptions and calculations. So there is nothing being made jointly. For example, even though during the period of unipolarity where the Euro-Atlantic integration discourse was prevalent in the Caucasus, all three states wanted to join NATO and EU. EU maybe not overtly being said, but all three shared at least the goal, the overarching goal to stand closer to the West and be integrated with the Euro-Atlantic and European institutions. But it's gone now. That's the problem. And there is no a global idea that could lead the states to adjust. I'm talking about first and foremost of the small states of the region, to adjust their foreign policies to that kind of conditions or to that kind of priorities or tendencies. What we see, what we see here is the dominance and the entrenchment, in fact, of the non-Western settings of the regional order. And the vivid example is the rise of 3+3, which is an exclusive regionalist framework of integration. It's quite vibrant, and that's the only one that we have currently moving forward.
I see. Though I still think that 3+3 is just a bluff. At least, honestly, I don't believe in this future. But this is another discussion. But follow to this logic, and I fully agree that many challenges those countries are facing linked to their existential choice. For instance, when we are talking about Georgia's dedication to be part of European Euro-Atlantic family, now we see active steps from Armenia towards European Union and so on. But my question is, as we are talking about theories, and we already touched upon many theories, are these countries prisoners of geography?
That's a great question. It shapes, I mean, we still have a strategic ambiguity or ambivalence in play because of the geography. To a certain extent, yes, geography is a static phenomenon, whereas the geopolitical location is something that you can adjust. But in order to understand all of these nuances, you need to have a respective strategic culture to calculate and, if possible, to coordinate more or less the moves or the geopolitical choices you do. Otherwise, it will stay fragmented. It is fragmented. It is profoundly fragmented due to the several factors. Strategic heterogeneity, we call it, but it is non-like-mindedness the states share or don't share together. Yeah. So the like-mindedness is important component here. When we see, for example, autocratic regimes, they share more or less similar worldview, at least about the important um, the key aspects of how they see, and they have sort of compatible perceptions, sort of kind of compatible um, um, position towards the global challenges and changes. Yeah, as they mentioned, many of them. Yeah, we're ranging from Russia to Iran to China. They want multipolar world order with the limited, extremely limited influence or managed influence of the West. And here in the region, I mean, the problem of non-like-mindedness in the Caucasus is prevalent. And there is no easy kind of easy peel to solve this. That's the point of geopolitical or political evolution, perhaps,
I see.
which may
I
take a
see.
lot of time. Yeah.
I see. And that's led me to another question. Okay. Let's put it in that way. Everything you said and described these small states, there is an undercurrent of empathy, I would say, a sense that small states, precisely because they know fragility, can, let's say, somehow contribute that great power understand this microcosm better. Is it true or not? Or you think that everything what is going on there, it's just a, let's say, attachment of the great powers geopolitical competition?
I would even say more. They instrumentalize the components of great powers' understandings of the region. If we put it straight, they manipulate sometimes the understanding, the making sense of the region, especially if the great power is an outsider of the region. The level of the extent of manipulation, the room of to maneuver, the room to manipulate is bigger. But the point is that all three states act as single players in this intrinsic game of the Caucasus geopolitics. In fact, they are not, as we've mentioned previously, they are not rule takers. They influence the policy of the great powers involved, more or less, and they deliver their own perception and interpretations of the ongoing processes or events. So yes, but the first thing for the outsiders of the region is that it is important to understand the indigenous patterns of statecraft, the indigenous mentality, the political mentality and political culture. This is something that is sometimes it's vague. It is obscured deliberately by the ruling elites as well. And this book is specifically about.
I see. Thank you very much, Eduardo. And I also encourage our audience to engage in Q&A conversation, and we already have a question. This is about your argument that Caucasus states do not have a strong sense of regional interest. And the question is that if this slowly changing with the development connectivity with Central Asia and in Europe. So another question is about Georgia's government. I will skip it with your permission because this is not about the book. It's the question for another discussion. I think audience will understand my position. So we are concentrated on the book and on the arguments Eduard has. So please, Eduard.
Okay, I'll put it in this way. The appearances are deceptive. Okay, so the ongoing Russia-Armenia re-engagement unfolding alongside Putin's parallel rapprochement with Azerbaijan, it is which was indicated at the CIS Dushanbe summit in October, suggests that the periodic crisis in Moscow's relations with Yerevan and Baku do not amount to substantive strategic breaks. Rather than signifying structural shifts, these episodes often reflect tactical frictions, moments of divergence that are managed or exploited by all sides to serve short-term political or diplomatic goals. In other words, they sometimes portray one reality. I mean, there is a complex game of perceiving and calculate and understanding the different realities at the same time. The Central Asia, the engagement of Europe in Central Asia, in the sense of infrastructural, economic aspects, is still not enough to make the region act in a more not reliable, but perhaps predictable way. Yes, as a one entity. It's not a one entity, even though it is geographically one. Geopolitically, it's not.
I say, and I would say that yes, about EU's engagement with Central Asia, it's definitely very, very important. But all these efforts are sufficient unless Europe has strategy towards South Caucasus, just because of geography.
United States has no clear strategy towards South Caucasus. I doubt it has strategy towards Central Asia, apart from the interest it expressed towards the infrastructure. But the Chinese, Russian, and other non-Western players involved are so evident that I don't think they will play it as a single-handed area of.
Okay, let me challenge you a little bit. Look from as you mentioned, and I agree that the United States has no strategy towards. So, though the peace agreement was signed in Washington, D.C., which is extremely important, really extremely important, and that makes me hope that strategy will be elaborated. But today I don't see the strategy. But let's play a little bit devil's advocate. You are in the different hemisphere. Why you should care about this region?
From the Western perspective.
From the American perspective.
As I mentioned, appearances are deceptive. So if you have a pre-signed document, it doesn't mean that the peace will prevail overnight. Even though the elites more or less are on the same page in that sense, the societies, I mean, the elites clearly know how to deliver the messages to their societies and and the state institutions. There is no balance of power between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So everything is in the context of regional consensus. But we have no guarantees that the consensus can alter. It may alter overnight. So the US involvement and actually the Western footprint in the Caucasus is warning. The problem is that it is not Russia that's retreating from the region. As Ilham Aliyev a few months ago stated, Russia is a Caucasus state, no one can kind of, squeeze them out. The problem is that geographically and to a certain extent geopolitically, the West is in deep perplexity because of the Ukraine conflict, because of Trump's administration's strategic recalibrations. And so the case of Washington agreement is still not sufficient. It's not sufficient pillar to build the strategy on or towards the Caucasus. But we can see how Russia is adapting to the new realities in the Caucasus. Well, it is to a great extent. I mean, if you are in the Caucasus, if you look at Russia's behavior in the Caucasus, it is obvious. I mean, well, for example, the controlled, there is an ambiguity in the Caucasus, as I mentioned. And so this controlled ambiguity remains useful for Moscow by tolerating limited, distant, and visible distance. Russia sustains its regional influence while appearing less like they use the concept of being present by seeing absent. It's a complex thing, but it's a way of maskirovka. It's a way of strategy of indirect actions Moscow developed over many years. So Russia's interests here, strategically, Russia's ambition is to be a first-rank actor. But because of the fact that there is their capabilities obviously doesn't fit their interests, they developed and adopted non-linear means of presence, influence, and so on. And so that's why, from Moscow's perspective, even Western facilitated initiatives such as the August 8, TRIP infrastructure deal are not inherently menacing for them. Because rather, TRIP is seen as complementing Moscow's broader connectivity agendas they have, linking Russia and Turkey through Azerbaijan, much as the North-South corridor connects Russia and Iran. The Moscow's, Kremlin's calculations assumes that the regional realities codified in 9 November 2020 trilateral statement will eventually compel Washington to either coordinate with Moscow or disengage from the initiative, because they still effectively, maintain their military presence on the ground. They have not at least bad relations, quite dynamic relations with Pashinyan and Aliyev, and also with the Georgian administration, as opposed to Trump's sometimes, hectic decision making, and also the weakness of Europe is important to consider in this sense. So and also the region first policy, Yerevan and Baku adopted with the so-called, to both countries few weeks ago they applied to join Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And that's making it obvious. In terms of institutional integration, they showcase, they exhibit a clear trend towards non-West, drifting towards the non-West rather than West. Towards Eurasia, not Europe as such.
I say, and that leads to my next question, actually. I agree that great powers competition shapes reality in the region. And also, this region is quite dynamic. And since you complete your book and send it to publisher, many things has been changed in Armenia, in region, in regional development, in Russia, in the United States, and so on. So all this development makes your argument stronger, or makes you just rethink or reconsider something you wrote in the book?
If I were writing it again, I would make some minor adjustments. But in general, I mean, the global tendencies are still in place. I mean, they didn't change. And as I mentioned, the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, the organization, I mean, the intention to apply. I mean, if you even look at the behavior of the Armenian government, it is clear. I mean, well, for example, the March 2025 parliamentary resolution initiating EU membership, it is largely symbolic and maybe domestic purposes. But that's not about structural reorientation of the state. It's not. I mean, at least there is no clear application. There is no structural or institutional approach towards it. On the other hand, the Pashinyan's government continues to highlight the benefits of the Eurasian Economic Union, which is incompatible with the EU. And same is with Azerbaijan, and same to some extent with Georgia, with Georgia's position to stay, not to irritate Russia, at least. And that's why Moscow is quite, I mean, Moscow tolerance of all of these balancing. There is from its view that Pashinyan's EU-oriented gestures pose no tangible challenge. I mean, these are nuances that should be considered. And this is something that I would, additionally, I mean, I would add some evidences based on what we are currently witnessing to my book. But in general, I mean, all that playbook is the same. There is no significant shift in there. Given the warm neutrality of Moscow, of Kremlin towards the Armenian government, rapprochement. And also the interesting thing is that there is many in the West. I mean, in general, it's important to highlight that moment. The frictions in Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia relations are sometimes overstated in the Western discourse as evidence of a decisive geopolitical realignment. In fact, it's not. I mean, there are minor problems and issues, but there is no sign of significant shift. And this is something should be considered. If we see a significant shift, then everyone will there was no doubt. I mean, it will be obvious and evident of that.
So from this perspective, do you see the region as a, let's say, early warning system of global order and geopolitical clash, or how do you see?
We can identify that the non-Western order is in place.
Non-Western.
Non-Western. Moscow, the cooperation between Moscow and Tehran, Moscow and Ankara, Moscow and Beijing are developing. Kremlin is reassessing its modus operandi in the Caucasus and cultivating more of a sophisticated, coordinated mode of engagement with the players with the small states in the region, that conceals the true extent of Russia's influence and reinforces the misleading impression that Russia is withdrawing. And also the 3+3. I wouldn't be so sure to consider 3+3 as a bubble. I mean, it is. Let's look at the entire trajectory with respect to this exclusive West excluding regional initiative. It is still developing. It is developing. And that's the point. I mean, at the bottom line, the consolidation of the energy infrastructure, cooperation in the economy, in the security affairs. As you may see, one of the external characteristics of the 3+3 is that the regional issues should be solved by the regional actors, meaning no Western involvement is needed. So it's a framework to manage the West. And in fact, the Caucasus states nowadays, they portray the West, the Western actors or the Western experts, that they are trying to manage Russia. In fact, they manage the West, and that's the problem. That's why getting back
yes,
to
please.
what I stated before, that appearances are deceptive. It is. I mean, they are deceptive.
I see. Okay. Let's put it another way. What can serve as a game changer in the region, in the regional development? You mentioned that this diversity and this strategic polarity, yeah. But at the same time, if we look through long-term pragmatic interest, all three countries should be interested in coherence, at least in basics and strategic issues. What can make them be coherent? What can make this region become a real region? I mean, geopolitical unity. And what can be the game changer in the regional development of the strategic development of this region?
Well, we can approach to this question in a theoretical sense and in a practical sense. In theoretical sense, the first thing comes to my mind is that there should be some form of existential challenge that may sober up all three states or elites to coordinate as the only option to survive. But it's a theoretical. It's just imagery. I mean, there is no tangible things taking place on the ground. Something like that, at least. In a practical sense. Maybe the consolidation of the regional powers could force them to adjust, compel them at least to adjust, which may have both positive and negative consequences for the states, especially in terms of their foreign policy. They may lose their room to maneuver. Because the non-Western regional order means specific rules of the game, means the use of force is not interpreted as something is being interpreted by the Western order, in the Western order.
I see. I say thank you very much, and I have so many questions, but regrettably our time is limited. We already reach our deadline. So as we have no further question from our distinguished audience, I would like to say and express my gratitude and thank you for this great conversation, and thank American Foreign Policy Institute for this great opportunity. And I would say that once again, this book is not just a study of three countries. It's a study of how the world truly works when the headlines fade and when treaties fade. This microcosm, what Eduard described in his book, really affects on wider region, because what happens in South Caucasus rarely stays there because it has its implication on other regions, and that's why we quite often say the wider Black Sea region. So you also remind us that the South Caucasus is not peripheral theater. It's a kind of intersection where great powers test their interest, and this interest collides, and so on, so on. And once again, it's quite important to have such kind of discussions, especially with participation of our American colleagues, to make this region visible, and once again, to make clear answer on this existential question, why this region matters. And my final remark is that I would say that everyone who is going to read this book, the great pleasure still awaits you. So, because this book, once again, it's not just a study, it's a storytelling from the insider for person who is not just a great academician, but he's a statesman who contributed a lot in the development of Armenia's statehood. Eduardo, thank you very much. And now, let's see, I give you a floor.
That was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, Tengiz, for your questions, for steering the process. And I would like to mention a minor but important epistemological thing. When you study the Caucasus, you need to always keep in mind, that's my insight, yeah, my takeaway from all of this, is that you should always distinguish the reality from the fact. In fact, the reality and fact are not always the same. The reality is the interpretation of the fact. That's the point. I mean, that's important thing to approach to studying the Caucasus. And Lindsay and the American Foreign Policy Council and the Central Asia-Caucasus Institute, thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't know whether you enjoyed it or not, but this is something that's the platform you provided is very much appreciated for this. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you both. And I did very much enjoy it. I have several pages of notes now, and look forward to learning a lot more with this new scope of reference. Anyways, so thank you to our audience as well, again, for tuning in to this webinar. And just to remind you, this will be posted on, of course, our Substack website and our YouTube channel, so that you can always go back and reference it in the future should you need to. But with that, we'll stop the recording now. And thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your evening and week.